Hi, my name is Clint Coons. I'm an attorney with Anderson Business Advisors and Law Group. Our law firm specializes in asset protection. I want to commend you for taking the time to watch this DVD series on the importance of asset protection, because I can tell you that the strategies that we're going to be sharing with you today will prove vital to you in your business planning. I want to tell you a little bit about my firm. I started in 1999 with the sole focus of working with individuals to protect their assets. I felt very strongly about this when I created the firm because I was so concerned about what a lawsuit can do to people in their everyday lives, how it can destroy them emotionally and financially. And I know this firsthand because when I was a child growing up, my family was involved in a lawsuit. In fact, this lawsuit came at the most inopportune time because my father just lost his job. And so he's faced with a lawsuit and no job. And my dad did not know what he was going to do for at least a good 2 to 3 months. I remember him talking to my mother and to his family and explaining to them how difficult financial times were going to be for us going forwards unless he could figure out how he was able to get through this lawsuit and get another job. Well, I can tell you what my father did, is that he turned to real estate. He looked at himself and he said, I can do this. As many of you who are watching this are probably investing in real estate, you can do it as well. And that's what my father did. This is how he built financial security for his family. Now, he built up a real estate portfolio that produces a consistent stream of income for him. And I noticed the effects of it when I came back from college. That from where my father had started to where he was when I came back from college, it was 180 degrees. And this is something that you're going to be looking to do if you have acquired this DVD series and you're watching this right now. Most likely you want to protect your real estate investments or your business, not necessarily real estate, but the principles are the same. That is, how can I go out there and do something to ensure that I don't risk it all? Now, when it comes to investing in real estate and asset protection, I can tell you this is a very dangerous field if you do not protect yourself appropriately. For example, I'm using my father. When he bought real estate, he understood immediately how important asset protection was based upon something that happened with a tenant. I remember as a child I often joke about the fact that I was an indentured servant to my father for 14 years, as was my brother, because he looked at us as an opportunity to build up his real estate portfolio on our backs. I'm joking about that. He did help me with my college education, but the fact is that we were involved as well as children in working in real estate. And one of the things that happened one time is that a tenant was concerned about heating their apartment. What do I mean by concerned about heating their apartment? Simple. Like any business owner, be it real estate, be it any type of business that you're running, you're going to look at ways to reduce your costs. And one way which my father wanted to reduce his cost in one of his buildings was to ensure that the tenants could not sit around in their t-shirt, their underwear, and turn the thermostat up to 95 degrees and open a window and enjoy the cool breeze, but a warm apartment at the same time. This is just going to kill your profit. So he turned down the boilers in this particular building to 68 degrees. So no matter what you turn the thermostat up to, your apartment would never get beyond 68 degrees. He saw this as an option that was available to him to keep his costs in line with his revenue. Now, the problem with that is that tenants, as you're going to discover if you haven't already, they're ingenious. They find ways to get beyond what you're trying to do, the way you try to place any restrictions upon them. And what some tenants would do in this particular building is they found another way to heat their apartment. Now, you might be thinking they went out and bought a space heater. Well, you're wrong if you thought that was the case, because tenants are ingenious. They don't have to go out and spend their own money to buy a space heater, because when you rent a house or you own a house, you have your own space heater right there in your kitchen. You know what I'm talking about. It's your oven. And that's what a tenant would do. They would use their oven to heat their apartment to get that nice 85-degree weather temperature that they were looking for and still sit there with their windows open. Now, how do I know this? Well, disaster fortunately was averted one day when we were walking down on the first floor of this apartment building and we smelled something. And I was with my father and he said, that's an odd smell to be down here. It doesn't smell right. Let's go explore and figure out where this is coming from. Well, we went up to a door, we knocked on it. We found that the room was particularly warm. This was odd given the fact that the building couldn't get beyond 68 degrees. Knocked a few times and finally we went in, and when we opened that door, this smell wafted over us. It was a putrid smell. It actually made you want to throw up. What did we find inside of that apartment? Well, we found an oven that was on 450 degrees that was open, and there was an individual tenant sitting in front of that oven about 4 feet away. Now, what unfortunately happened for him is that he was sitting there in front of this oven and he died of a heart attack, and he'd been dead for a week before we found him. He'd actually started to melt in front of this oven. That's a great thing about having kids. My dad looked at myself and my brother and said, "This is why I had you guys, to clean up this mess." And so he sent us in there to do that, of course, after the coroner came in and cleaned it up. But the fact of the matter is that disaster there was averted because we were able to find this before anything could happen. I mean, where could liability lie in this situation? Simply, it could have possibly burned down the apartment if that stove was left on for too long. The smells, people could have in adjoining apartments could have started smelling it, and then they could raise a claim that they thought that somehow it had impacted them by smelling that. So there are things there that you need to be aware of when it comes to investing in real estate, and I'm going to show you how to protect it. But with anything, it all begins with planning in general. Now, some of the steps we're going to be going through on this DVD is how to plan for your investing for your small business. Because I can tell you firsthand, because I myself am a real estate investor and small business owner, even though I have a law firm, I run everything the same way. I look at basics and I build from there. I create a foundation, and that's something that you should be doing today, started right now, building your foundation for your financial future to ensure that everything is not put at risk. Many of you who are watching this DVD will be attending one of our asset protection workshops in the upcoming weeks or months. And I can tell you is that the strategies and the information I'll be giving you right now will lead into that and make you better prepared, so when you come to one of our workshops, you'll be able to sit down with one of us and you'll know the type of plan that you will need. Many of you, after watching this, will be able to jump in and create your own plan right away. But the fact of that matter is that you need to put together a plan. And with any good planning, it basically starts with three concepts. You want to reduce your taxes. Okay, everybody feels that they're taxed too much. You look at what the problems we're having right now with Congress and the country and the states. There's budget shortfalls throughout well, not all the states, but a vast majority of them. Congress doesn't know how to pay their bills. They want to increase the debt limit. So eventually it's going to come to a breaking point. And that breaking point, they're going to have to put that burden on your backs. Now, I don't mind paying my fair share in taxes, but when you have 50% of the population that pays no taxes, I think my fair share is not what Congress is going to tell me my fair share is going to be in the future. I think everybody should participate. But right now, that's not the case. So I'm going to take every legal step available to me to ensure that I pay the least amount of tax that is legally allowable under the tax code. And so in order to do this, you have to understand how taxes work and what type of business structures are appropriate for your individual situation and what you intend to do. Because many people, when they start off down this road, they do everything in their own name. And by the time they come to our firm and they come to ask us for assistance in asset protection planning and tax reduction, because we do have a tax department with our firm where we prepare taxes and we show people how to save $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year on their taxes. Many times when they get to us, they find out that that horse has left the barn and there's nothing we can do for you because you've done everything in your own name. So stop, wait, before you go forwards with this next business venture, before you start investing in real estate. Maybe some of you are watching this or invest in the stock market, or you're just considering creating a business in general to go out and sell goods to the public over the internet. Think about ways in which you can reduce your taxes, because there are if you set up the appropriate business structure. The last thing you want to do is do it in your own name. Now, part of this DVD series is going to be about taxes. My business partner, Toby Mathis, will be teaching you about tax reduction strategies with this DVD series, and he'll explain to you how to reduce your taxes and things that you should be looking out for. So tax planning is important. Another aspect about sound business planning is how to attain business credit. How can you take your business and now gain access to other people's money? You know how tight it is right now with banks, with lending. I mean, it's all over the news. After what happened with the real estate market, now it's difficult to get loans. Well, for individuals, that's the case, but for businesses, not necessarily. If you have bad credit, you can build your own credit profile through your business, and now you can have access to other lines of credit that may not be available to you as an individual. This is an opportunity that comes from starting at the ground, building your foundation, creating your business, and creating its own separate profile. Because when you create a business, you're creating it separate and apart from you. That's all part about sound business planning, making sure that we're separate and apart from our business ventures. So we reduce liability and we reduce taxes. Now, I brought up the word liability. That's the next step in sound business planning. That is creating a structure around your affairs and separating out your assets from you so that your assets are protected from whatever you do as an individual And your business, or you're protected from your business. So if anything happens with the tenant, anything happens in your business, that you yourself will not be sued on a personal basis. Because I can tell you, some of you may know this already who are watching this, the worst thing that you'll ever want to experience in your life is answering the door and somebody standing there with a piece of paper and tells you that you've been served. Your life will change at that point, I can guarantee it. I've worked with people before in this situation, and the thing they tell me time and time again, it's not the money, although it is very expensive to be involved in a lawsuit. It's the emotional factor. And I don't want to see you go through this because everything you have is exposed. Attorneys know this. That when they decide to bring a claim against you, they know that it's a huge emotional roller coaster for you. And if they can push enough buttons, you're going to be willing to pay them whatever they're asking. Or you'll pay them a lot because you're afraid that you're going to lose everything you own. I was just working with a client the other day who received a demand letter from a law firm all the way on the other side of the country, and it was just a shakedown. But you read the letter, it made you think that you were going to lose a lot more if you didn't agree to their initial demands. And so this individual I'm working with right now is willing to pay up some rather than risk all. The fact of the matter is, this individual had nothing to risk. But when you read the letter, it made you believe that you did, and you could lose a lot of money if you didn't pay the firm right up front. So these are the type of tactics attorneys use to cajole you, to scare you into settling and paying money. But what I'm going to do is give you the tools to fight back. I'm going to show you how you can protect yourself. So if that lawsuit ever comes down your way, and you're served, you can look the guy straight in the eye and say, give it your best shot. Because what you have to remember, attorney, it's not how much you win, it's how much you collect. And the type of structures I create for my clients, we make sure that they don't collect. And that's something that you can do. And it doesn't take a lot of creative planning. It's not extremely expensive to do this. It just takes understanding what type of assets you have, how they should be protected, and how all the stuff works together to ensure that you have a sound financial, sound asset protection tax reduction plan. So with that, what I'd like to do is take you down the road of threats, just to let you know what's out there and where you're at risk, so you can start to appreciate those areas that may need some fine-tuning to ensure that you're not at risk. So let's now go into the various threats that face you. And understand, these are just a small portion of the various threats out there. All you need is somebody with a creative mind to come up with a new legal theory, and you can find yourself in court. So with that, let's talk about some of the threats. All right, if you're going to start investing in real estate, one of the main threats you're going to face as a real estate investor is environmental concerns. Environmental concerns right now are some of the greatest expense or threats for any real estate investor because there's no statute of limitations on an environmental claim. You could own property that's been contaminated for 15 years and you may not have done it, but you're going to find out that you're the person who is responsible for the cleanup because, hey, you're the owner. From an owner standpoint of owning real estate, the thing you need to be worried about is something that has taken the place of asbestos litigation, and that is mold. Mold right now is the #1 concern for all investors. What's the problem with mold is that you can't detect it. You can walk into a place and you may not see any mold, and you can actually bring in your own expert, a mold remediation expert, and tell him to go through there, and he may not find any mold spores. But if that tenant decides that they want to bring a claim against you, I guarantee you they can find an attorney who will find an expert who will determine that there are mold spores in your property. I know this firsthand because I've had a few clients who have dealt with this particular issue. Now, the thing about mold, which is extremely disconcerting for many people, is the fact that you may have insurance and think you're protected, but you'll find out that your insurance will not cover you. They will not deal with environmental claims. You're on your own for this. One of my clients just recently was involved in a case where she was sued for over $1 million for mold contamination. Now, why did this case come up? Because the tenant has lost their job, and my client had evicted that person. Rather than leave the premises, what the client or the tenant decided to do was bring a case against my particular client for mold. The thing about mold is that attorneys out there have found a way in which they can go and shake you down because the damages are so catastrophic that you're willing to pay. I actually attended a CLE not too long ago. That is where attorneys will attend these classes and they're taught how to bring claims for certain types of actions, and this one happened to be on mold. And I went into this class with an open mind. I wanted to learn how to protect my clients against this particular claim. And I got in there, and it was really interesting. This attorney walked up, and first thing he wrote on the board, he said, "Mold equals gold." And I can tell you, a lot of the attorneys in that room started clapping. They thought that was the best thing out there. Now, as I proceeded to listen to his presentation, he got to the part where he started talking about experts. And he said, hey, if you're involved in mold litigation, you're thinking about bringing a case actually for mold, then what you should do as a plaintiff's attorney is call one of these 10 experts right here. I vetted them. I can tell you they will go into the property and they will find mold spores. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you're listening to this right now, you're thinking to yourself, how can that be? It is already predestined to find mold spores. Absolutely. That's why those experts work for plaintiff's attorneys. Now, he didn't want to let me feel left out because I am not a plaintiff's attorney. We do not engage in litigation in our firm. Our firm is strictly about asset protection. I mean, there's a reason why I have 17,000 clients throughout the country. It's because we're great at what we do, and that is preserving your assets. Now, he looked to the one side of the room that he wasn't getting a lot of applause from when he would throw up these statements such as mold equals gold. And he said, I understand that you guys are here today as well to learn about this type of litigation, how to protect your clients. Well, I have something for you, so you don't walk away feeling you didn't get anything out of the seminar. Here's a list of 8 experts. Contact any one of these 8 experts, and they will tell you there's no mold in that property. So what does that make you think? Yeah, that the system is gamed, that it's set up by attorneys for attorneys to create litigation to take money out of your pocket just to fund them. You know how the story goes or the joke goes that there's one attorney in town, he won't make any money, but you bring another attorney into town, they're both going to get rich. That's what happens when it comes to environmental right now, is that a lot of cases are being thrown around because of mold. I've had a few clients involved with it. You need to make sure that your assets are adequately protected so you personally do not bear any risk of loss. Another concern we face right now, if you're going to get involved in real estate, of course, is your tenants. I mean, tenants do things that are not necessarily in their best interest and not in yours for sure. And at the end of the day, because you're the property owner, somehow, some way, they're going to find that you're liable. And so you need to protect yourself from your tenant's actions. I gave you an example of my father where the tenant had actually died in the premises with the oven turned on to 450 degrees. Well, I could go through cases like that all day long. I'll give you a recent one. I was in Hawaii not too long ago, about 3 weeks ago, and I met with one of my clients while I was there. Now, what was extremely frustrating for this client is that she has $1 million rental in Hawaii. I mean, that's the average price for some of these homes over there. And her tenant decided to burn it down. Yeah, the tenant wasn't too happy with the fact that he was evicted, so he thought he would get a little retribution against my client as the landlord by burning her house down. Now, it wouldn't be so bad, well, I mean, it's always bad when you have your house burned down, but it wouldn't be so bad if it was just her house that was damaged, because she had insurance to cover the damage that had occurred on her property. But if you've ever been around a house fire before, you know that if your house is next to another house, that house is going to experience some damage as well, because when your house is burning, it gets really hot, and there's smoke that comes from a fire. Well, the property next door, another multi-million-dollar home, was damaged to the tune of several $100,000. She doesn't have enough money in her insurance policy to cover the damage that was done to the adjoining property owner. Now, you may look at the tenant and say, you're responsible. Well, there's a reason why the tenant couldn't pay the rent, because he has no money, so that makes you the responsible party for the actions of your tenant. And in this particular case, she is looking at several $100,000 out of pocket to repair her neighbor's property as a result of her tenant's actions. Tenants are a huge threat to you. You have to appreciate the threat. With any business venture that you go into, you have to understand where the landmines exist, and tenants are one of those. And so there's ways that we can protect you so that if something like that does occur, you don't risk all of your assets. Because if everything is in your own name, as I'm going to be showing you, then everything is at risk. So you want to put entities in place now so that when you acquire these assets in the future, you've done it the right way and you've minimized your overall risk exposure. Now, here's something else that you may not be aware of, and that is you can be sued for something that happened a long time ago, something that happened what I call yesterday. I have a client right now who's involved in a case. This actually happens to be another environmental case. This environmental case stems from something that occurred over 35 years ago. I have an 82-year-old client who is being sued for something that occurred 35 years ago when her husband owned a piece of property. He owned a boat yard, and at that point in time it was acceptable to bring boats in, scrape the bottoms, paint them, and wash everything down into the harbor. Well, now that's no longer acceptable. In fact, it's against the law to do that. So the person who owns the property right now has systematically gone through all the previous owners of this piece of property and has sued them for several hundred thousands to millions of dollars to help him cover the cost of the cleanup. Because now that he owns the property, he is being pressured by the state to clean up the area in front of it, that is in the harbor. He has to clean all that up, and that's a very expensive proposition for him. So he wants to collect as much money as he can because, again, insurance is not going to cover you here. So now he's suing my client, who is 82 years old, and he's suing her for $2 million. Now, she probably forgot about this situation, the fact they'd owned this boatyard for a short period of time, but now she remembers it vividly because she has been served with a $2 million complaint. Now, I can tell you that we've protected her, that she is not going to risk $2 million, and they will not even recover any of those funds because of the planning that took place a few years ago to ensure that if anything like this ever occurred, everything she owns is not at risk. But the fact of the matter is that this is something that she never in her wildest dreams she could ever believe would ever happen to her, but it did. And that's something people need to understand, you who is watching this, about lawsuits in general, is that you cannot plan a lawsuit. That is, you do not know when something's going to occur, that tragedy can strike at any time. And the question is, are you prepared for that tragedy? Because once the tragedy occurs, planning cannot take place. Anything we do from that point on is considered a fraudulent transfer, and it's done as a result of the lawsuit, and the courts can undo it. I mean, great example is that I was contacted by a doctor not too long ago. This individual had heard about us through some other people who we'd structured some clients, and he'd referred over to me, and he had a particular concern, and that is, how do I protect all my assets? Now, when somebody calls me up and they say, Clint, I need to protect all my assets immediately and I need it done yesterday, I know we got a problem there that already exists, and I can't help them. With this individual, what had happened is that he'd gone out to one of his rental properties and he was working on it with a backhoe, and he was swinging the backhoe around, and he didn't notice his brother-in-law was up on a ladder doing some work on the house, and he knocked the ladder out from underneath him. And unfortunately, he was up 2 stories, and when he fell, he broke his neck and he died right there on the premises. Now, this particular person is being sued right now by the widow. And what's unfortunate is that he thought his insurance would be there to protect him. Well, his insurance company, that is both his contractor's policy and his liability policy, have filed declaratory judgments not to cover him. Yeah, you thought your insurance company is there to protect you? Bring a sizable claim and see what happens. If they can, they're going to run for the hills and leave you left holding the bag. Because if you have to fight your insurance company, that's money that comes out of your pocket to fight them, to get them to pay a claim that they're obligated to pay because you've been paying them premiums on a monthly basis. But if they can get out of it, they will. And I can go on all day long. You come to the event, I'll give you some more examples of insurance companies getting out of claims that you would think that they're legally obligated to pay, but the courts let them out. So it's an unfortunate situation. It's something that he would never forecast would ever happen. It's not foreseeable. It did happen. It was an accident. But he told me, he said, Clint, I've worked hard all my life. I'm 55 years old. I was looking to retire, and now I don't see retirement in sight because I know that I'm going to be hit with this lawsuit and I'm going to be responsible for this claim. My insurance company's not going to be there. It's wiping me out. I don't want to have that conversation with you. I don't want you to have to call an attorney and have that conversation. So take steps, and we're going to show you what you can do to ensure that that will not happen. You wouldn't be wiped out in that particular situation. So that's an example of where liability might lie. You can never predict it. Other areas, kids, children. If you have children, they're a liability to you. They can do things. If you have a boat, there was a recent case I read not too long ago where some kids were out playing around in a boat and they took a sharp turn and one of the kids was thrown out of the boat. He sued and he received $600,000 against the parents because they said that he had anxiety now of riding on boats, this child, and he had neck issues as a result of being thrown out of the boat. I mean, these are bogus claims many times that are brought, but it doesn't matter. You get a jury to buy off on it, then you're going to be the responsible party. Now, what was particularly disconcerting for this case is that the people who were sued only had $250,000 in coverage, so they had to come up with the difference. Now, if you don't have the difference, simple. What the plaintiff's attorney will do is they'll file a judgment against you, and so whenever you go to sell property, that's when they'll get paid. So we want to protect ourselves because threats come from any angle. You can never predict them. I'll give you another example of that. There was an individual who built a deck, added a deck onto the house, something that you might do. You might hire a contractor to come out and build you a deck. That's what this guy did. Now, when the contractor finished up, the individual homeowner went out there and was looking around. He found a few boards that were left on the project and a few bolts. What would you do in that situation? Would you think to call your contractor and say, well, if you left 2 or 3 boards here and a few bolts, that tells me that you didn't install this deck properly? Or would you think, this is what I would think, that, hey, this is leftover material that he didn't have to use, therefore he just left it for me to either clean up, which contractors will do that, or he's figured maybe I could use it for some other project. Well, it turns out that this homeowner was so excited about his new deck, he decided to throw a party. And he invited all these people over, and everybody was out on his deck partying, and the deck collapsed. It separated from the house, and somebody was killed, plus several people were injured as a result of this deck collapsing. Now, who's liable? Well, they sued the contractor. The contractor went bankrupt, of course, so he didn't have any money that he could pay. And so it came back to the homeowner, and they found that the homeowner was liable for the deck collapsing because when he found these boards and these bolts that were left behind by the contractor, the court said you had a duty to contact the contractor and ask them if he did not adequately secure the deck to your house, because that was the cause of this accident. It hadn't been adequately secured with all those bolts. The contractor missed putting in 6 bolts that would have kept this deck supposedly from collapsing. Therefore, the homeowner is liable for that action. That's unfortunate, but this happens all the time. You just cannot predict when a lawsuit's going to hit you. Fact of the matter is, there's just too many darn attorneys out there that need to make a living, so they're out looking for clients. When economic times get tough, where am I going to go to find money? I'm going to go after you because you have money, obviously. You're out there, you have a job, so why not take from you to enrich myself? Other areas, contracts. You enter into a contract with somebody, you're looking at going out to buy a house, you enter into a contract, you back out of it. You think everything's fine. 5 years later, you're sued for something that happened 5 years ago. I mean, this is one of the areas that I'm often astounded when people go to seek assistance from attorneys, they tell them, go out, start your business, make some money, then come back and let's get you structured. Well, everything you've done up until that point of getting structured, you're going to be liable for. Contracts that you've entered into, 6 years typically, you can be sued over that contract. So you can be out there in a very successful business and all of a sudden you're slapped with a lawsuit for something that happened 5 years ago. And now you're personally liable. You don't want to be in that situation. So that's an area. Investing in real estate, loan defaults, okay, dealing with banks. You've seen a lot of this in the past several years where people had bought property, they'd paid too much for it, the property value dropped out, they couldn't pay the mortgage on it, now the banks have come after them. The banks are taking their properties back and then they're hitting them with a deficiency judgment. And then anything that person owns in their own name is at risk. I was talking to one individual who was dealing with the bank, and this bank was extremely aggressive with them in pursuing a deficiency judgment. And the reason being is that the bank had hired a private investigator to go out to take a look at this individual to see what they had in their name. This individual investor had bought a few properties in Florida. Those properties, unfortunately, were underwater. He had several other properties in different states that were not underwater, that were producing cash flow. The bank found out about those properties and they were unwilling to negotiate a short sale with this particular individual because he knew he had assets. And they told him if he doesn't pay, they would file liens in every county, file that judgment, that is, in every county, which amounts to a lien against all of his other property. So eventually the bank would be paid. Well, if you have these things structured properly in proper entities, that would not occur in your personal situation. And you can do that if you understand how to take title to property the appropriate way to ensure that it's not all put at risk. So don't wait for the other shoe to drop. These are some threats that face you. You need to be aware of them. You can do things now to ensure that a lawsuit in the future will not wipe you out. And what we're going to be doing here shortly is I'm going to be walking you through various entities, how they would work for you in your particular situation, and discuss the things that you need to be aware of so you can be better informed when it comes to investing. And again, if you're coming to one of our asset protection workshops, we're going to go through this in detail for you. And so you'll understand just exactly where these landmines lie and how you can walk through these without having one explode in your face. All right, let's talk now about your assets and discuss how to break them up so you know what's at risk, what creates liability for you, and what doesn't, and how it should be protected. All right, with any planning, what we want to do now is look at your assets and then break them down so we determine what is a danger to you and what is a safe asset that is not a danger to you, that you're a danger to it. And the way we do that is with a matrix. So what I'm going to draw for you now is a standard matrix of how we go about structuring somebody. Now you should be thinking about this prior to contacting our firm for asset protection assistance or going to one of our events, because when you come to our workshops, what we're going to do is sit down with you on a one-on-one basis and go through your own personal matrix with you. And I can tell you, if you've already filled that out prior to coming to the workshop, it's going to speed along that conference so we can get to the heart of the matter to show you immediately how we're going to protect your assets and reduce your taxes. So let's start off at showing you how a matrix works and what you need to be concerned about. So what you see up here is a standard matrix. It's got 4 boxes in there. And what we're going to do is break these boxes up into different categories for you. We have on one side is what we call personal. Okay, this is your personal side. I'm just right here. We have safe over here for safe assets. We have danger over here. And then we have business down here. Now these are 4 different quadrants where we're going to put your assets and put you. So what I want you to understand is that there's a difference. When you look at your assets, some people are inclined to think, hey, I'm just going to take everything I own and I'm going to put it in an entity and then I'm protected. So I'm going to take my house, I'm going to take my cars, I'm going to take my kids, and I'm going to put them in an entity. So if they do anything wrong, they can't sue me individually and I'm protected. Well, it doesn't work that way. The thing about asset protection is that there's certain things that can be protected and there's certain things that should not be protected. Because what type of perception do we want somebody to think about when they're looking at us if we're involved in a lawsuit and we walk into court and you say, hey, I myself am an entity, Your Honor. You can bring any claim you want against me, but at the end of the day, I'm protected. So I'm not even going to respond to this case. Go ahead, give it your best shot. You're not going to collect anything. Well, that's a surefire way to have somebody take a look at your structures and undo everything because you did not understand the difference between what is business and what is personal. And you never want to mix those. You always want to keep them separate. And the way we go about doing that is determining what is business, what is personal, and then putting an asset protection structure around those assets where it is appropriate and where it is not. Now in the personal quadrant, the one here in the upper left, those are assets that typically we're not going to protect. They're going to stay in your own name. You will acquire insurance for them. And I know I told you that insurance typically is not going to cover you in some major cases or claims. But I'll tell you what, it's better than putting personal assets in a business entity or in an asset protection structure. And then we have that structure called into question. That is, there's no distinction between you and it, and you run the risk the judge just dissolves everything in front of your face. So from the personal side, what would we put inside of here? Typically what I'm going to do is put your personal residence would go in the personal side. Any personal bank account you have would go on your personal side because these are things we use in our everyday life. What else might you have that you use in your everyday life? How about a vehicle? So if you have a car that you use to get around to work, we'll put that in your personal side. I know some of you right now might be laughing at my drawings. Believe me, I'm not an artist, I'm an attorney. So your vehicle would go inside of there, maybe a boat. Okay, now I can know some of you are thinking, well, hey, Clint, you just told me a story about a family or some kids that were out on a boat and a child was injured. Why would I want to put a boat in my own name? Couldn't I be sued for that? Absolutely you could be. Even if we put it in an entity, you would still be involved in a lawsuit because your child was operating the boat wherein the harm occurred. So you can't escape your own personal liability for your actions. Some people falsely believe that if they protect everything, like their car, for instance, they put their car in an entity and they're driving down the road and they hit a pedestrian, which is a case that I read about not too long ago. That is, a pedestrian ran out into traffic and was hit and killed by a motorist. This motorist had the green light, was driving down the road, pedestrians hit and killed. Pedestrian's family sued and collected $1.6 million from this individual. Far exceeded their liability coverage under their policy. They had to come out of pocket well over $1 million to cover this claim. Now it's ridiculous, I understand that. They should have never compensated this individual because he was an idiot. He ran out in front of traffic. But I tell you, this is our society right now. Everybody's a victim. You got money, you're the one who's going to pay. Thing is, if you had that car in an entity, it wouldn't protect you because they're going to sue the driver. So it's personal assets stay in the personal quadrant, they stay in your own name. Now I know there are some assets when it comes to vehicles that are going to be used for business. We have a solution for those types of vehicles where we can protect them. But your personal stuff we put up here in the personal quadrant. So what you would do with your structures, you're looking at it, you're going to decide what is personal, put all that into there in that upper quadrant. Now, I may change that if I meet with you or one of the other attorneys in our firm sit down with you and we notice some things in your personal quadrant because you've taken the time to fill this out ahead of time, then they may adjust that for you. But we want to get a thinking for where your assets lie and what you're thinking about your assets because that helps us in putting together an overall plan for you. Now, let's talk about the safe assets. What is the definition of a safe asset? Well, it's an asset that doesn't create liability for you. I mean, think of it this way, stocks and bonds. I mean, what's the greatest risk you have there? That they go down, that your broker doesn't make the right decisions for you and you end up losing money in your portfolio. But in and of themselves, you're not going to be sued over that. I mean, how would you be sued for owning stock in a company? What, that you walk around with the stock certificates one day and you decide that you're going to see if you can create paper cuts and you start slicing people with them? I mean, that's ridiculous, of course. It sounds absurd, but that's the only liability you have with this particular asset. So in the safe quadrant, what I'm looking at are those assets that do not create liability for you. That is, you create liability for your assets because you're the one out there doing something. So if you're involved in an accident, then anything that you hold in your own name would be put at risk. So we want to ensure that these assets are removed beyond the reach of your creditors or the claims for your children. If your children are involved in a lawsuit, that if they sue them, of course, you're going to be held liable for them. They cannot take your life savings because you have taken the steps now to protect it. So in the safe quadrant, we'll typically put in here cash. That's one thing, cash and savings. We'll put in stocks. You know, a big thing right now, people like to invest in metal, so gold would go inside of there. Anything of a financial standpoint would be in this quadrant here because these assets do not create liability for us. And the reason why I want to put them in that quadrant is because when it comes to protection planning, we have nothing to fear for them. We can group all of those into one entity. Now, the danger quadrant, what goes inside of there? Well, it's just the opposite. Those are the assets that create liability for you. If you're investing in real estate, you know what we're talking about now because we've already given you some stories. I've told you about different claims that have been brought. You own real estate, you're at risk. So we want to put all of our rental real estate down there in the danger quadrant. So I'll put those types of assets down there. Real estate, that's a danger. That is, we own it, we don't even touch it, we don't do anything. A tenant's injured, you end up being sued because you own the property, or they find environmental contamination, as I talked about in those other two situations. You're liable for that. So we put real estate down here in the danger quadrant. Now, in the business side, what I want to do is I want to put whatever it is that you plan to do with your investing. If you want to go out and buy and sell real estate, you want to rent real estate, manage real estate, that's a business. So over there, we put the actual business activity. So over here, the best way to describe that is I'm going to put a box in this side because when I refer to asset protection entities, corporations, and LLCs, I like to use boxes. And so over here, we would put your real estate business right here. Now understand, the reason I'm putting this quadrant together for you and showing you how it works is that when you're looking at your assets in your business, you want to ensure that safe assets are always separate from dangerous assets. And we want to ensure that your dangerous assets are separate from you. So you don't have personal liability for whatever occurs with those particular assets. Now it gets a little more complicated than that as well. We want to make sure that with our dangerous assets, they're separated from each other. So if you look at this bottom quadrant down here, I'm actually going to be drawing a few lines in it because we don't want them all grouped together. If something happens with property number 1 and all 5 properties are together in the same box, same entity, then all 5 of them are at risk. So when we look at the danger quadrant, we'll start breaking that up into smaller subsections to ensure that this house right here can't take down these 2 houses as well if a claim is brought against it. So you want to isolate to protect these assets from each other. Now with your business, we want to ensure that your assets are protected from your business. Because when you go into business, you're going to be doing something, and that brings liability. Whenever you go out there and you start working and start dealing with people and contracting with them, you have potentially liability for your business. So we want to isolate that. So if something were to happen with your business, it is your business that is the responsible party and not you individually. Now, given the fact that a business has liability, we don't want to have a lot of assets inside of there. And so when I talked about equipment earlier today, or earlier in this presentation about protecting it, this is an area where if you, in your particular business, you're going to acquire some vehicles for your corporation. Maybe you decide that you're going to get involved in construction as well on your real estate. You buy a backhoe or possibly a dump truck. I mean, who knows where this business is going to take you in 2 to 3 years from now. Well, you would never want to have those assets owned by your company because if something happens with your company, then all of your assets, your tools that you use to create your income are now at risk. Here's a perfect example of that. My brother, he has an asphalt company that he's built up over the past 20 years. He's very successful at what he does. Well, one of the things I had to do for him was show him how to protect himself. I remember my father, he called me up one day, he told me, Clint, I've sent you through law school. You're on permanent retainer for life for me and the family. So you need to go structure your brother for free. Better not bill him for it. I want to make sure that if anything happens to him, he's protected. I went over there and I looked at his business, looked at his assets, and I told my brother, I said, all right, for your business, you need a corporation. Now, he assumed then that he would want to take all of his equipment and put it in his corporation. I said, no, that's not what we want to do, because if we did that, then if something happens to you, all of those assets are at risk. What we want to do is protect them. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to separate your equipment from your business, because literally your equipment is a safe asset. You may not think that. You may think a car is a dangerous asset. And I get this a lot, and when I teach these workshops and I talk to people, I'll throw out there and say, hey, is a car a dangerous asset? 85% of the people will say it is a dangerous asset. Well, I'll tell you what, I've never seen a car walk into a bar, order up a few gin and tonics, and then go out and drive itself home by itself. There's always somebody behind the wheel. So it's the vehicle itself is not the dangerous asset, because if you did nothing with it, it's just going to sit there. It's the driver that's the danger. So vehicles are pretty much safe, in my opinion. So what I do is I take all of the equipment and I put it into one entity. And then I lease the equipment back to the company. So if something happens with the company, you do not lose all of your assets. And this, for my brother, came home to roost 2 years ago when he asked my father to come over and assist him in a particular job that he was working on. See, my father's retired, so he has nothing else to do besides go over and help my brother, I guess. So my father went over there, and they were backing up I think it was an excavator is what it was, on a trailer. And they parked the trailer, and they took the excavator off, and they went and did their work, and the next day they had to go back and pick up the trailer. So they went over to pick up this trailer, and as my father was backing up the dump truck to hook up to the hitch on the trailer, he hit the hitch, and what did that trailer start doing? Well, it turns out that the trailer was on an incline, and my brother forgot to chuck the wheels, and so the trailer started rolling down this hill. Now here's my brother trying to stop the trailer. He's pulling on the trailer as the trailer's starting to pick up speed as it's going down the hill. And the reason my brother wants to stop this trailer is because there's an intersection at the bottom of this hill. And he's concerned that this several-ton trailer, if it rolls through there and there's somebody driving through it, it could possibly kill somebody. I mean, that's going through his mind. And as they told it to me, my father was yelling at my brother to get away from the trailer. He may kill himself trying to stop it. But my brother's trying to stop this trailer from rolling down the hill. Now, thankfully, the trailer went through the intersection and was stopped by a tree, and nobody was injured. That is an example of where disaster was averted. But the fact of the matter is, if it had hit somebody, who would be at risk? Well, my brother's business, All Aces Paving, would be at risk because it is All Aces Paving that was utilizing that trailer when the wheels were not properly chucked. The LLC that owned the trailer had no control over it at the time, so it would be protected. So that trailer, which is owned by the LLC, is not an asset of the business. So if somebody was injured and they sued the business, the only thing they could get would be the assets that are inside of the business itself. They could not take the trailer, they could not take the dump truck, they could not take all the other tools that he uses in his asphalt business, because they're owned by a company that leases them back to the corporation. I've kind of jumped ahead of myself now in telling you this story, but what I wanted to reinforce is that the purpose of the quadrant is to show you that you need to break up your assets, however they're held right now, into these distinct units. So when it comes to putting together your plan, you know what should go where into what particular entity. It's just like creating a business plan for your corporation, for your real estate business, if you're getting involved in real estate, or for your trade in the stock market, or for whatever else you're going into. Toby, my business partner, will be talking to you later about the importance of business plans and how they can help you from a tax standpoint as well. Well, this is part of your asset protection business planning right here, breaking these things up into these distinct units. Now, from here, once we have this down, then we're going to go and we're going to talk about the various entities that we utilize in protecting what we've put down on this piece of paper right here. Because what we want to do for you now is show you how you can protect yourself. But what you have to appreciate is that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. When it comes to asset protection planning, I tell people it's an individualized situation. That is, we look at you, we look at your assets, and we make a determination what is best for you based upon your tax motivations, based upon your asset protection needs. You don't want to just throw in entities out there if they do not provide any benefit for you. And too many times I run into people and I ask them, hey, why'd you create that particular entity? I don't know, CPA said it was a thing to do. Or else I went on LegalZoom.com, and I set up that particular entity because my neighbor has one, and he said he's real happy with that type of entity. That's not the way you want to put your plan together. You need to understand why you're utilizing a particular entity, how it fits into your planning, and how it's going to benefit you at the end of the day. Because the last thing you want to find out is when you walk into court, the particular entity you created isn't there to protect you because it was the wrong entity for your situation. So let's talk now about the various entities and how they work. All right, well, let's start off with the entity that's probably used by, or most of you are familiar with, and that is the corporation. Any of you own any stock in the stock market, you've invested in a corporation. Now, everybody has a preconceived idea of a corporation and how it's going to be used. A lot of people, their preconceived notion is that the corporation isn't appropriate for them because they've heard from maybe their neighbor, their attorney, or their CPA that they have to be making several $100,000s a year before a corporation makes sense. I can tell you as a small business owner and an attorney who specializes in this area, that is bad advice. And if you follow that, you're guaranteed to pay more than your fair share in taxes. In fact, the corporation is probably the most important entity that you'll be implementing when you're first starting your business because it is where your expenses will be run through. Now, Toby will be covering some of the various expenses you can be taking through your corporation. That is, if you get it set up now before you start incurring these expenses. So a lot of things about what we've been talking about, if you've noticed, is about timing, when you create it. Because if you don't have it, you're not going to receive the benefit from it. Now, what does a corporation do for you? Well, first off, it provides great tax savings. And I'm not going to cover those. I'm going to let Toby handle that. But also, in addition to tax savings, it provides great liability protection. That is, when you go out to conduct your business and you're signing contracts with people, you sign on behalf of your corporation. One of the things we go through for a couple hours in the workshop that we teach is we talk to their clients and the individual attendees about how they need to operate their business as a corporate officer or a director in their company to ensure that they do not have personal liability. When I was talking about a contract, if you sign a contract with an individual for the purchase of a home, you sign it as an officer of your corporation. You later back out of that agreement. Then the homeowner who is looking to sell you that property, if they wanted to pursue the claim, the only person they can go after is the corporation because they dealt with the corporation and not with you individually. So this is what we refer to as liability protection. Now, when it comes to corporations, there's two types. You've probably heard of this before, that's C versus S. A C corporation, quite simple. It's taxed at its own tax rate. An S corporation, it flows down to you. Now, most people are convinced when they talk to their CPA that they need an S corporation versus a C corporation. And there's several reasons for that. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. You can always convert later, and this is something that we get into during our 3-day course. It's not something I have time to go into now because I don't want to confuse you. It's a very in-depth topic which is important that is based upon your particular business venture. But I can tell you, I like to start people off in C corporations because there's more deductions there. And when you get your business started off the ground, you want to be able to write off multiple things. So a C corporation just makes sense for people. Later, you can always convert back to an S if it's appropriate for your situation. But the other benefit of the C corporation over the S corporation that I particularly like is the fact that with a C corporation, it's taxed in its own tax bracket. That means nothing flows down onto your 1040. If I want taxable income, I take it out of my corporation. If I don't want taxable income, I don't pull it out. Not to mention, if it's not flown down onto my return, then it's something when I go to obtain a loan for real estate that I'm acquiring, it isn't anything that pops up on my loan application. It isn't anything that an underwriter is going to come back to me and say, Mr. Coons, I see that you have a S corporation. Now, in order to give you this loan to buy this particular piece of property, we're going to want to take a look at your corporation's tax returns. We're going to want to see your corporation's balance sheet and your profit and loss. I can tell you that will come up when you're operating your business through an S Corp. It will not come up through a C Corp because they don't know about it. A lot of what we do with asset protection planning is on what I refer to as a need to know rather than a need to show basis. That is, if I think you need the information, I will disclose it, rather than disclosing everything and you determining what's important to you. So corporations provide you privacy. This is why I like utilizing a corporation, is to keep your affairs private or my affairs private if I'm running my business. Now, something else about corporations if you're involved in real estate. This is the entity that is going to ensure that you avoid dealer status. Now, this is something new I'm throwing at you right now, and this is something Toby will be talking about when he covers taxes. But if you're investing in real estate, you want to have a corporation set up for all of your short-term deals because it is a corporation that would be taxed as a dealer. And I can tell you as an individual, you do not want dealer status because it will push you up into a higher tax bracket and remove several of the deductions that are going to be available to you as an investor. So when you're thinking of corporations, think of it this way. Corporations provide you privacy, they reduce your taxes, and they're appropriate for short-term business activities from a real estate standpoint. That is, if you're going to be flipping properties, rehabbing for sale, you want to run those through your corporation. This is the appropriate entity for that. So a corporation, again, it's formed under state law. It's a great entity for your business. Now, another entity that people often refer to when it comes to asset protection planning is a limited liability company and a limited partnership. Now, both of these entities are unique in their ability to protect you. Unlike the corporation, which provides liability protection, that is, if the company is sued, you're not personally liable, the limited liability company and a limited partnership will many times provide asset protection. Now, this is different than liability protection. With liability protection, you're protected from your business, but your business is not protected from you. That is, if you were sued individually, your corporate shares are potentially at risk. That's why I told you earlier, with my brother in that example with the equipment, you do not want to have a lot of assets inside of your corporation because if you're sued personally, then your corporation could be taken from you. And I'll show you some strategies on how to do that in the workshop. We'll go in detail on how you can structure yourself to always make sure that your corporation's protected. And also in this DVD, I'll give you one or two as well that you can take with you on your protection strategies. So the LLC, the limited partnership, those will protect you. They provide asset protection. That is, your assets that are held inside of them are protected from you, and the assets that are inside of them, you're protected from them. Oftentimes we refer to this as a charging order protected entity. That is, if something were to happen, an individual, a creditor of yours, cannot take your entity from you because the charging order protections under state law prevent that from occurring. Now, if this is a new concept for you and you've not heard of it before, let me explain how this works. Think of an LLC or a limited partnership as a box. And so let me draw that for you here. This is your box, and into your box, you're going to put some assets. Now, we're dealing with real estate. You're going to put your rental real estate into this box. You're not going to put all of it. We'll have multiple boxes for that. When we talk about strategies here in a bit, I'll go through that for you. Let's just throw one house into there for the moment. So we place one house inside of this box. I'm going to put you underneath the box because you're the owner of the box. So you're down here as the owner, what we refer to as the member in a limited liability company or the limited partner in a limited partnership. So you own this box. Now, if something were to happen inside of the box, that is your property right here, if it burns down and there's somebody that's injured as a result of that, who do they sue? Well, they sue the owner of the property. If the property is owned by the box, then the box is liable. So whatever the box owns is subject to attachment by the creditor. But you as an individual, owner of the box, you're not liable. It's your box that is liable. Now this goes back to that quadrant again. When I'm told you, you do not want to put all of your assets into one box because then everything is at risk. So the box is liable, it takes the fall, but you do not. So if you own several different boxes, as I'm showing you right now on the screen, then what you stand to lose is just this one big box. Let me just erase it because it just now disappeared in your structure, but not all of the other boxes. You see where I'm going with that? So we want to protect you from your assets. That's one way the limited liability company, the limited partnership protects you. The second way is what we call the charging order protected entity. This is where the individual, that is the owner of the box, will not lose their box if they're sued individually. How does that work? Well, in this particular case, let's go back to our box again. We have that up here. You have your property inside of it. You're the owner down here. Now you're being sued. How would that come up? Let's say you're the one that's driving down the street one day. I'll use the example of my wife. She was driving to make a deposit at the bank for the business and to go to a grocery store one day. And I got a call from her. I called in the middle of the day and she said, "Honey, I'm involved in a car accident." She'd actually rear-ended somebody. She was making a turn into the parking area where the bank and the grocery store existed. Now, My first response was what? Okay, if you're a guy watching this, you're probably right here with me. Is the car okay? Now that, I can tell you, that was the wrong comment, and I had to pay dearly for saying that. She basically said to me, what, you don't care about me? Now I tried to use logic on her. I said, honey, of course you're okay, because if you weren't, then you would not be calling me right now if you were injured. It would be a paramedic or a police officer. So I assumed you were fine. That didn't carry the day. But the point of the matter is that immediately I asked my wife, I said, well, what were you doing? She told me that she was going to make a deposit for the business and go to grocery shopping. I said, well, hopefully you were going grocery shopping first rather than driving to make a deposit for the business. Because if you told the officer when he takes your statement that you're going to make a deposit for the business, you can see where I'm going with this, that the business is now going to be held liable. As will you, honey, because you were driving the car, you rear-ended this person. Now, it wasn't an accident by any stretch of the imagination where you might think somebody is injured, but who knows nowadays? People can be hit from behind, you can be driving 3 miles an hour, you touch their bumper, and all of a sudden they'll bring a claim against you for traumatic head injuries and neck injuries and back injuries. Well, with my wife, I told her this. I said, so if you were working for, if not working, if you were going to the grocery store, then it had nothing to do with the business. Now, which one was it? I expected her to say grocery store. Instead, my wife was still angry at me, and she said, you'll find out later when you read the report, and she hung up on me. So guys, always ask, is your wife okay first? The point of the matter is, if it was for the grocery store, then she would be held personally liable. The business is not liable because she was not conducting business when the accident occurred. So let's assume that somebody sued them. They brought a claim against my wife for running into the back of them, not paying attention when she was driving, and a claim is brought against my wife for $1 million for these traumatic injuries that occurred when she ran into the rear end of somebody else's car. So they sue my wife for $1 million and they get a judgment against her. Now the question is, what can they collect? Well, if they find out that all my wife owns is this limited liability company that has a $1 million property in there, ideally, they would like to be able to have my wife sell that property and distribute the proceeds from them. Or just take the LLC themselves, take the box, sell the assets and pull the cash out. The thing is, with a charging order protected entity, they can do neither. They can't force you to sell the assets. They cannot take the entity from you and then sell it themselves. They can't even be involved with that entity. The only thing they get is a judgment against you, which they can then convert to a lien on your company. What does that mean to you? Well, it means this, is that they will put a lock on my wife's LLC. That is her interest. So if she decides to distribute any of the rental income to herself, it will go to her creditor over here to pay off that judgment. Now, if you know somebody has a judgment against your interest in your LLC, or they put this charging order on it, are you going to be making distributions to them? Probably not. Now, this is why the operating agreement that you create for your limited liability company is so important, because the operating agreement will specify what a creditor is entitled to. That is, if you're sued individually, what they can force you to do. If you have the appropriate language inside of your LLC, then they cannot get after your assets. They have to wait until you make distributions in order to get paid. Well, I can tell you, if it was my LLC, I'm not making any distributions. I'm keeping that money inside of here. Or when you come to the event, we'll show you some strategies how you can pull it out through management fees and loans. So you'll still have access to the money. The person who doesn't get paid is your creditor. Now, what's the best part about this is that now you have negotiating power. You can walk up to them and you can say, listen, you haven't been paid. You're not going to get paid. This was a bogus case, but I'm not above compensating you for your injuries. I understand that you were inconvenienced as a result of my running into you when I was traveling 3 miles an hour. I'm willing to pay for any damage that was caused to your car and give you some money for your inconvenience, but you're not going to get $1 million. Just because your attorney convinced a jury of it doesn't mean you're entitled to it. Now, the lawsuit lottery comes to a stop right here, and the individual realizes that do they want something rather than nothing? Most of the time, after a year of receiving nothing, they're going to say, give me something. But I can tell you, with a charging order protected entity, if they don't want to take something, we can make life extremely uncomfortable for them, and this is why we create these entities. Because with a charging order protected entity, if you put that charging order on somebody's interest, we're going to tell you that you're liable for our tax liability. Now, it's not all our tax liability, but it's the taxes that is associated with this particular LLC. Think of it another way. If this rental property generated $20,000 a year in annual income, we don't distribute any of it, you still have to pay taxes on that money because it's yours. Instead, it's going to be our creditor who's going to be paying taxes on the $20,000 because they were so kind enough to put the charging order on our limited liability company. We're going to send them the tax bill, just not any money to help them pay their taxes. How long do you think that's going to go on until the creditor finally decides they no longer want to be involved with this charging order on your LLC? I'll tell you what. When you create the LLC, you should have specific language in there that addresses this issue. That is, your creditor is going to be responsible for the tax liability associated with your LLC if they utilize that charging order. That is something that is going to drive people away and will protect you. I'll give you an example of how this actually played out recently in that case with the client who's 82 years old. So here's this big firm. They're out of Seattle, and they come walking in with their expensive suits and their fancy cars to an arbitration, and they're going to force my client or intimidate my client into coughing up $2 million. Well, this particular client happens to have a limited liability company with a lot of cash inside of it. And we set that limited liability company up in a state that offers charging order protections. Now, I'm going to come back to that here in just a minute when I said that certain states do not provide this. So, we explained to them that she has very little assets in her own name, but she has a limited liability company that's set up. They then looked at us and they got together, they talked, they came back, and they said, well, rather than pay us $2 million, will you pay us $200,000? I mean, that's the power of the limited liability company, because they knew at that point in time, here these fancy lawyers, they thought they had a big fat payday by pressuring an 82-year-old woman into paying over this money. They found out that it was ripped out from underneath them because they didn't know she had an LLC the way we set it up. There's ways you can set up these entities, limited liability companies, limited partnerships, and even corporations where your name won't appear on them. So if somebody runs an asset search, they won't find out about you. That's something we go through in the class as well, where we show you how to be anonymous with respect to your entities. So once they found that information, they knew the uphill battle they have, that even if they win, they lose and they won't get paid. So they're willing to come off their high horse, come off this unreasonable expectation that she's going to pay $2 million. They were willing to settle now for $200,000. Now there's more to the story. But we're not going to get into that with these DVDs. Come to the class, maybe I'll tell you what happened. So with the LLC, you're protected. They cannot take it from you. You're still in control. Sometimes people look at this and they say, well, Clint, what good is that? If I can't pull out a distribution, isn't it like losing the asset? Not at all, because you still have the asset. If you didn't have this, you wouldn't have the assets. So now you're in a position of control. So charging order protected entities are perfect for protecting your safe assets and your dangerous assets if they're utilized the right way. Now, with these entities, you have to keep in mind some are appropriate for certain situations, some are not. Limited partnerships and LLCs, which ones do we use? Typically, with safe assets, I will use a limited partnership. It's designed perfect for utilizing safe assets because of the tax attributes of the limited partnership. The LLC is more appropriate for real estate because of the tax attributes, that is the flow-through depreciation that comes onto your 1040. So when you're thinking about what type of entities you may need in your particular situation, think of it this way. If you're investing long-term in real estate, you will be utilizing limited liability companies. If you're investing in stocks and bonds and you want to protect liquid types of investments, you can probably be using a limited partnership or some combination thereof. LLCs also work for joint ventures. If you want to joint venture with somebody, then you should be considering utilizing a limited liability company to protect yourself from the joint venture and from your other partners. So that's another area where this entity is often used. So think of it again. With a limited liability company, we're going to utilize it for long-term holds. Rental real estate will go inside of the LLC. If you want to go into a joint venture with somebody to invest in real estate, you should be utilizing a limited liability company, not a corporation. If you want to invest or protect your liquid investments, then you should be utilizing a limited partnership. And last but not least, you want to create these entities in a state that provides charging order protections. That makes it a charging order protected entity. There are certain states out there that do not protect you. Most notably is Florida. Florida last year handed down a decision. It's often referred to as the Olmsted decision because that is one of the the defendants in that case. And what happened in that case, he had an LLC set up in Florida, several $1,000,000 inside of it, and the FTC was able to take this person's LLC interest from him and distribute all the money to themselves. That's what the government was able to do to him. And the court in Florida found that the LLC there did not provide charging order protections. In fact, when you read the opinion, they stated that if the language of the Florida statute had the following, and they referred to Nevada, and that's where we like to set up a lot of entities, is in Nevada. If they had similar language that they do in Nevada, then they would have reached a different conclusion, and that is the FTC would not have been able to take this man's interest in his limited liability company, and his money would have been protected. But because of the state statute, the way the legislatures drafted it, the court felt that it could give away his interest in his LLC, and it did not violate state law. That's extremely important when you're creating your entity, that you ensure that you have the type of protections we're referring to here, that is charging order protections, so that if you're involved in a personal lawsuit, you're not going to lose your limited liability company. That comes from structuring. That is how to put these entities together. Most of the times in my experience, local attorneys, they just don't understand this stuff. And it's unfortunate. When I come to go out to teach these events, people often come to me with an LLC they created online or from their local attorney. And then they're dismayed to find out that the attorney didn't understand charging order protections and that the entity that they have set up for themselves would not protect them in the situation that I just laid out for you. So you have to be acutely aware of the differences between the state laws in determining where your entity should be protected, or where it should be set up, that is, for your investments. So LLCs, LPs, great for asset protection. They should be there for your real estate investments and your safe assets. Now, another entity I want to talk about, you may not be familiar with, is what's called a land trust. If you're going to be investing in real estate, this is an entity you will definitely be using for your investment. The land trust is essentially a title holding vehicle. It doesn't provide asset protection, but what it does for you is it gives you a way to take title to property that can keep your ownership private, that if somebody's snooping around, they won't know that you own it. That's one benefit of a land trust. Another benefit of the land trust, which is often used by real estate investors, and this is why it's so important, is that if you have a mortgage on your property, there could be problems with your lender if you took that property and put it directly into the limited liability company. So we utilize a land trust to solve that particular issue by first placing the property into the land trust and then moving the land trust into an LLC. And I'll draw this out for you here in a bit. But what is a land trust? Okay. A land trust is quite simply a revocable trust. That's all it is. That's why it does not provide asset protection for you. It's a document that you create where you're listed as a beneficiary. You'll typically name yourself or somebody else as a trustee to begin with of this trust. And then you'll take title to your property, you'll deed it into the name of this trust. Now, as the beneficiary of the trust, and think of it as a box, you have this box that holds this piece of property, you can take that box and transfer it to another entity or to another person. But nobody finds out about these transfers because what they see, that is if somebody was looking on title, what they see is a transfer from your name into the box. What they'll never discover is a transfer of the box into a different box, or that box to a different person, because that document does not get recorded. That is a private document. A lot of an important concept of asset protection planning is privacy, maintaining privacy of your business affairs. Remember, need to show versus need to know. Keep it on a need-to-know basis. And this is where the land trust will provide that need-to-know, because you are in control of the document. So only you know where this box that holds your property ultimately resides. And it won't see the light of day unless you're ever involved in a lawsuit. That's when you would bring this document out and say, hey, I don't own it. Because with the land trust, when I said it doesn't provide asset protection, if the property comes under assault and it's sued, then the trust is liable, as are you, the beneficiary. So we tell people when you set up a land trust, we do it initially for your residential real estate, and then we put that land trust into an LLC. That's all done by the attorneys. It's something that we've been doing for years, 15 years, been utilizing this strategy to move properties around. Things to keep in mind is that when you set up a land trust, it should always be created whenever you have debt on residential real estate. You do not want to risk the chance of putting your property directly in the LLC for asset protection without utilizing this particular trust. Because if a lender discovers it, they could call your note due and make you refinance the property. And you don't want to be in a situation where you have to refinance your property because you may not be able to get financing for it and you could lose it. It used to be about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would tell people, put your property in the LLC. It's not that big a concern because banks at that time were more in the business of loaning money and not owning property. But things have changed. Now banks want to own property, it seems like, and they're unwilling to work with individuals on their mortgages. So what you want to do is remove any impediment between you and your bank maintaining that relationship you have with them. And if you put your property directly in the LLC in this market and it's encumbered, you got problems. So what we utilize is a land trust. It's the primary tool utilized by real estate investors to transfer title to real estate without alerting banks or other people to the fact there's been a property transfer. Now, why don't the banks balk with the land trust? Because it's a revocable trust. And just as with a living trust, when it comes to estate planning, moving property into a revocable trust is covered under the Garn-St. Germain Act. This act is a federal act, Federal Depository Act, which prevents lenders from accelerating the note when there's a transfer into a revocable trust. So that's why we use it. With my personal investing, I own property in 6 different states. In my residential real estate that is encumbered, I use a land trust every single time for that initial step of my protection planning. That is, I first transfer it into the land trust and then I move my land trust into the LLC. That's how it's done. That's how all the successful real estate investors do it across this country. That's what you're going to be doing when it comes to your planning. Now, I can tell you this, if you go to a local guy, local attorney, and you bring up the word land trust, they'll probably look at you and say, what are you talking about? Doesn't work in this state. That comes from the fact of ignorance. They do not understand this particular type of tool when it comes to investing because not all states have adopted statutes for the land trust. There are certain states out there that have, Hawaii, Florida, Illinois. Those are a few of the 13 states that have it. The rest have not. So we fall under the common law. So just always refer to it as a revocable trust. People will know what you're talking about then. Don't use the word land trust, and you'll get along just fine with utilizing this tool in your planning. Now, the last entity I wanted to discuss with you that I think is really important when it comes to planning for your strategy, for your asset protection, is the living trust. We often talk about, protecting our assets, how important that is. If something were to happen, we're involved in a lawsuit, we could lose everything, which is possible. And that's why you're going to put together these LLCs. But whether or not that will happen, we don't know. But I can guarantee you one thing that will happen is that you're eventually going to pass away. And this is an area where most people fail to plan. They focus on taxes, they focus on their business, they focus on asset protection, but they don't focus on their estate planning. And then when they pass away, unfortunately, some situations unexpectedly, then there's chaos left in their wake. Just this year alone, my wife had 2 friends who passed away in their early 40s. Both of them passed away from aneurysms. They were there one minute and they were laying on the floor the next. Now, what's extremely unfortunate is that one of these individuals was a mother with 2 young children she left behind, and they had not put together an estate plan. That is, there was not a guardian appointed for these children, and so it was left to the court to filter all this out. And believe me, you don't want to leave it to the court to decide what is in the best interest of your children should something happen to you. You want to be specifying that in your estate plan, who should be taking care of your kids. Now, if your kids are growing, then you want your estate plan in place to ensure that these assets, the tools that we're creating now to protect your assets, they get distributed to your individuals without the court's intervention or attorney's intervention. And that's what a living trust is designed to do. It's a revocable trust. It's another box, if you want to talk about boxes again. I like to utilize that. It's this big box that holds everything that you own. You put everything inside of it, your LLCs, your land trusts, your corporations, your limited partnerships, all go into this box, your personal residence. It doesn't provide asset protection to you, but it does provide a seamless way in which to transfer those assets to your children should something happen to you, if you're married, to you and your spouse. And so the living trust, I cannot impress upon you enough how important this entity is in your planning. I myself have been through situations where both sides of my family were destroyed over wills because that's how they thought they should plan for their estate. That is, people will not talk to other people in my family to this day because I had an uncle who was handling my grandmother's estate. She had 2 pieces of property, 5 bank accounts. In order to distribute that out to 3 children, that is the 3, my uncle being one of the kids, it took him 4.5 years, and he charged $75,000 in fees for him to handle this estate. Now, it's a travesty and there's nothing you can do about it, but as a result, it drove a wedge between him and his 2 brothers as a result of his actions. With a living trust, that will not occur because you set it up ahead of time where you do not have to go to probate. If everything's inside of your trust, it avoids it completely. In fact, when my wife's grandmother passed away, I'd created a living trust for her. She had similar assets to my grandmother. And when the trustee, that is my wife's aunt, handled her estate, it took her 3 months to distribute out the 2 pieces of property and the few accounts that her grandmother had to the beneficiaries. Why the difference? Because it's in the document and in the planning. The living trust is by far the most important entity you will ever create, but unfortunately for many people, they look at this as the last entity they should be putting together. I mean, you can make it all, but if you just die unexpectedly and you don't have your proper estate plan in place, you've just wasted an opportunity here. You're going to increase your estate taxes. You're going to make everything now public. I mean, a lot of things that we've been talking about is privacy and how important that is in your planning. You pass away, you don't have a living trust, it's all going to probate. It's now all a matter of public record. So this document, we're going to be covering the trust in detail at the asset protection event. You can call us as well. We can talk to you about the importance of it if you understand the need for it right now. But it's something that should not be overlooked and something that you should start with before we even get into corporations and tax savings. So those are the entities we typically deal with when we're talking to people and looking at building their base foundation. For your asset protection structures, you'll be considering utilizing a corporation, a limited partnership, a limited liability company, a land trust, and a living trust. Those are 5 core entities that people utilize to reduce taxes, reduce estate taxes, keep their affairs private, and last but not least, ensure that their assets are protected should any harm occur. All right, now let's talk about some strategies, because I know you've been looking forward to this, and show you how we can be putting all these things together to make sure that you're protected. Okay, let's talk about how these entities work and how you can incorporate them into your plan to create an overall asset protection structure that is going to, again, reduce your taxes, protect your assets, and make sure it gets passed on to your loved ones if something happens to you. The first entity we want to create for you is a corporation. And I told you earlier that you want to create a C corporation for tax planning purposes. If you've obtained this DVD and you've gone through a class, or you've signed up for a workshop and some other educational workshops you're going to be attending on how to invest in real estate or how to do some other types of businesses, then you want to be able to write off that expense. Well, as Toby's going to be telling you, if you want to get that expense on your tax return as a deductible expense, you better get your C corporation set up before you start taking these classes. Otherwise, you're going to tie your hands and limit your ability to do this. So that's why when I'm working with individuals, the first entity we look to establish for them is that C corporation. And so we're going to put that at the top of the screen as your overriding company that everything's going to fall underneath. And so I'll draw a big box up here, and this is going to be your corp. Now, as a corporation, of course, you're going to be the officer now of your corporation and director. So we put you inside of it to show that you have this liability protection. When you go out there to buy a house, if you're going to flip that house, you'll be running that through the corporation. So I'm going to put flips up here on the side just to tell you that this type of activity is appropriate for this C corporation. How would that work? Well, if I see a house, I go to buy it. If you're buying it for cash, you buy it directly in the name of the corporation. Now let's assume that you're not buying it for cash, but you intend to rehab it and then sell it, so you have to get some financing. Well, in that case, buy it, of course, in your own name and then transfer it into the corporation. Now you might be just thinking there and saying, well, wait a minute, Clint. You just talked about a land trust not too long ago and the importance of creating that, because if banks find out the fact you've transferred property and it's encumbered, they may accelerate your note. Remember, this particular property here is something you plan to sell anyways. So when the bank discovers it, if they do, it's not going to happen necessarily, but if they did, you're probably well on your way to selling the property anyway, so it won't be a concern. So I wouldn't concern yourself with the land trust if you're going to flip property. If you bought it in your own name, let's say you bought it out here, then you would deed it into your corporation. You would perform the rehab work on the property under the name of your corporation, and then when you sell the property, of course, all the proceeds would flow right back into your corporation. Once you have that money in the corporation, what are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to reimburse yourself, pay yourself back for those expenses that you've incurred to date. That becomes a deduction to the corporation. It's a reimbursement to you, so it's non-taxable. So that's where the benefits from a tax standpoint come in with this company. As an individual, you would not be able to do this. Unless, of course, you're already a real estate agent or broker, you're not going to be able to pick up these types of deductions and generate this type of reimbursable tax-free income to yourself. So the corporation is that primary entity. That is the first entity we're typically going to create for somebody. That's why I put it at top. It'll also be used for management. If you're going to be holding real estate long term, you want to manage those properties. You should not do it in your own name. You should do it as an officer of the company. Make your corporation the manager. I remember when my father would go out of town on a business trip. Sometimes my mom would be petrified because tenants would call up our house. We didn't have an unlisted number. They knew who the manager was. It was my father. They knew he was also the owner. So they would call up at night and threaten my mother, and it would scare her because they tried to intimidate her. They knew my father was out of town and they were upset with him for something he's doing. Maybe he's evicting them. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to keep your affairs private. You don't want your tenants to know necessarily who the owner of the property is. You want to portray yourself as just a manager that works for the owner. You do so as an employee of this corporation. So corporations in a real estate context are often used for management of your real estate. I'll just put MGR, so you're going to manage your real estate. If you want to subdivide raw land, if that's an area you're looking to invest in, you better have that corporation set up because it'll be uniquely situated for subdividing property to avoid dealer status on your property. So that's another reason why we want the corporation. So I can tell you this, you're going to come to the event, we're going to get you set up with the corporation. If you want to, you can call us now, we'll get that corporation set up for you. So now going forwards, every expense that you incur will be a deductible expense for you, provided it's attributed to your business. We'll show you how to do that at the event. Now, under the corporation, we're going to create limited liability companies. And so what we'll do down here is we create LLCs to hold your rental real estate. And you'll have LLCs set up to break up these properties. You should have one property per LLC. The reason I suggest that is because if anything happens on any particular property, it is only that one limited liability company that is at risk and your other investments are safe. Here's what I've done in my structure. I like to buy, of course, property if I can, pay for it for cash, or if I have to finance it. However I do it, I have LLCs set up in anticipation. I walk into a particular area where I decide I'm going to invest. For example, right now I'm investing in the Las Vegas market. I have created for myself 3 LLCs that are sitting on the shelf. I always have 3 at the ready. So when I find a piece of property that I want to buy and turn into a rental, I can take title in that LLC. It's already set up, ready to go. If you're investing in real estate, you should have 1 or 2 LLCs ready, set up to take title to property as soon as you see it. Because you never know. When these deals come up, maybe it's going to be a quick closing. If you're going to buy for cash, quick closing, you got to have that money ready to fly. Have that LLC set up, close right in the name of the LLC. It's already there for you. If you're going to deal with a lender, maybe your lender will allow you to take title in the name of the LLC. Well, they won't do it if you don't have the LLC set up, so you have to have it set up. So I like to keep a few of them ready to go at any particular moment. Now, the LLCs, as I stated, they're going to hold your rental real estate. These LLCs that hold the property, you should put 1 property per LLC. However, you may want to group them. In some situations, when we sit down with you, we might tell you you could group 2 or 3 properties together based upon equity values. That is, if you had 3 properties with $20,000 equity apiece, maybe we could put all 3 together. You understand the risks that if one of them is attacked, all the properties are at risk for that particular lawsuit. But at the end of the day, what we're protecting is that $60,000 in equity. So I have some clients where we've grouped multiple properties together in one limited liability company. And sometimes it's a cost standpoint. It depends on where you live. If these LLCs were set up, for instance, in California, California charges $800 a year per limited liability company. If you have 20 properties, you can already see that the costs are going to start to add up. And so there comes a point where you might think, well, it doesn't make sense to have that many, so let's reduce it down, minimize my overall risk to the best abilities possible with keeping in mind the overall cost factor. And so that's what we can look at, and that's why when we sit down with our clients, we explain to them, in some states it's very inexpensive to create an LLCs. It might be best to create one per. Other states, well, we're going to group some of your properties together. That's all about the planning process. So your rentals will go into the limited liability companies in a manner which works for you, but we want to get them out of your name. Now, I said they go into the LLC, but we need to rewind a bit here. If these properties are encumbered, we talked about the land trust as being an essential tool here. Now, the way that works is that we take the land trust, we set it up first, so I'll just put LT there, and then we deed your property into the trust. So we file a deed from your name into this land trust. And you're down here and you own this land trust. It's in your name, you own the beneficial interest, you're listed as the beneficiary on the trust document. Okay, at that point, if you remember, you have no asset protection. If something were to happen to the property right here and a lawsuit developed, you would be personally liable for that lawsuit. So what we want to do is get that land trust out of your name and put it into an entity that provides asset protection. For real estate, that's a limited liability company. So we will create a LLC for you right here, and then we will transfer this land trust into the LLC. So you're no longer a beneficiary of the land trust. You're going to disappear here. You become a member in this limited liability company that owns the land trust. So nobody is aware of the fact that you moved the property or you moved the land trust out of your name into the LLC, because that trust document is a private document. The only thing that anybody will see is on title the name of the trust, and that is all. They do not actually see the trust document, which specifies that you're the beneficiary and eventually it becomes the LLC. So this is how we protect your real estate from the banks, or in some cases from prying eyes, because if you set it up, and we're going to show you some techniques on how to set this up, your name will not even appear on the trust on title to the property, because we can use what's called a nominee trustee, which gives you this anonymity. There's a lot of techniques that come into play here, but what we're trying to do for you, or what we will do for you, is create a structure that if anything happens, if any leg comes under attack, it's just that one leg and we can jettison it off, and all the other ones still remain healthy and protected from that one diseased leg that is attacked by a creditor. Now, where do we create these entities? That's an important factor. Well, as we stated earlier, you want to create them in a state that offers charging order protections. Now, what we'll typically do with individuals when we sit down with them is explain, if you have multiple LLCs, we want to ensure that we minimize your tax and reporting requirements. We can do that. That is, I can create limited liability companies for you where you don't have to file any tax returns for them. They have to be set up a certain way as a single member disregarded company. That's in the operating agreement and how we file to obtain your EIN number, your employer identification number with the IRS. It's possible if it's done the right way. Now, we then take those LLCs. For example, if we created an LLC for you here, this one was in, say in Tennessee. There's a Tennessee LLC and a Florida LLC. Well, Florida does not have great asset protection. I've already told you about that when we talked about the Olmstead decision. That is, you do not want to own a Florida limited liability company, because if somebody sues you, they can take your LLC from you. So this is where the magic comes in asset protection, and why most local attorneys do not understand how to protect their clients in the event of a lawsuit. That by creating the LLC may not provide the protection you're looking for. So what I want to do for you is put you in a state that provides that protection, provides unparalleled protection, where there is no question as a result of what's going to occur. And that state is oftentimes, every time, Nevada. For you, for your protection. So what we'll do here is we will take all of your LLCs and wrap them in this big box, if you can see that, in a Nevada LLC, and I'll put you down here as the owner of the Nevada LLC. Now think of it this way. What you see up here is a lot of scribble, but what it implies is that you can have, and I have several clients in this situation, they have 8, 9, 12 limited liability companies. All of those limited liability companies are owned by one Nevada LLC. Now, why did we set them up with the Nevada LLC? Make that one Nevada LLC the owner of all those multiple companies? Well, quite frankly, number one, if you're ever involved in a lawsuit and somebody asks you, how many LLCs do you own? Well, you can see from the box, if I have you down here, you only own a Nevada LLC. Your Nevada LLC owns a bunch of other LLCs, but you personally only own one LLC. So right there, there's asset protection, because if you told somebody you own one LLC, it's a lot different than telling them you owe 14 LLCs, because what's conveyed to somebody, they think, oh, this guy's rich, he's got 14 LLCs. My situation, they don't know what you're worth because you only have one. So that's one benefit. The second benefit of utilizing the Nevada entity is that charging order protected entity. Nevada has the best asset protection right now. They just recently changed their law in response to Olmstead. That is, they already had a great law, but they took it now and kicked it out of the atmosphere when it comes to asset protection. It's not enough from Nevada's standpoint to have some of the best law in the country that states that the only remedy available to a creditor is that charging order. They went so far as to put in their statute that a judge could not fashion any type of equitable remedy, that the sole remedy available to them is just the charging order. Now you might think, hey, this is extra language they didn't need to put in there. But the problem you face as a legislature is you don't know how a judge is going to interpret a statute, how they're going to find ways to work around it. So your best bet, if you want to provide the best asset protection, is to draft it in such a way that there is no question, where you tell the judge there's only one way and one way only in this particular statute. And in Nevada right now, when it comes to the charging order, that's it, and there's nothing else. So I can tell you that if you were sued, you have a Nevada LLC, you're protected, that they could not take it from you. So I have this LLC holding all of these other multiple limited liability companies. Now, since I don't own that local LLC in Tennessee and in Florida and possibly California, there's nothing that they could take from me if those states don't offer charging order protections, because I don't own them. So now we've just worked around the deficiencies in your local state law through a Nevada limited liability company. Now, something else this would provide for you. When setting it up in this manner that you see on this screen, we can hide the fact that you're even associated with these LLCs. Because now that Nevada LLC gets listed with the Secretary of State, so your name no longer appears as being associated with these state-specific LLCs, because you're not the member, it's a Nevada LLC. So with this, if somebody's sniffing around and trying to determine whether or not you're a potential candidate, remember the individual I talked about with the banks, where the banks went out there, hired a private investigator to find out what this person owned? If that person had been set up with this particular structure right here, those banks would have accepted the short sale and never come after him for a deficiency judgment or even threatened it, because a private investigator would not have been able to figure out what this individual owns, because nothing is in his name that is discoverable. Because when we create your Nevada LLC, we use a nominee. And you're going to be meeting him here shortly when he talks about taxes. He's on approximately 16,000 different entities that have been created in Nevada. He's listed as the nominee manager of the LLC, or he's a nominee officer and director of the corporation. And then he resigns, and then our clients become the controlling parties in that particular case. But the fact of the matter is that anybody sniffing around, our clients' names are not associated with these entities because their names are not listed with the Secretary of State. It's the attorney Toby Mathis, who you'll be meeting here shortly, who's listed on all these entities. This is why Nevada is considered one of the top jurisdictions when it comes to asset protection planning, because you can set up entities and maintain your privacy. Again, need to know versus need to show, and that's why we go with Nevada. We can protect that anonymity. So it just follows from Nevada. It would then go down to your state. If somebody looked at the LLC again, it points them back to the Nevada LLC. They look at the Nevada LLC, they see this guy named A.T. Mathis, and that's where the buck stops. They don't know that that's actually your company, you're in control of it, and it owns all of your assets. This type of asset protection planning is what you should have if you're serious about protecting your assets and you want to get involved in real estate. So, the Nevada LLC owns the very state LLCs, which then hold your rental real estate. Now, if you're involved in tax liens, okay, you should have a separate LLC set up for your tax liens. This is an area that a lot of times people don't see the liability with tax liens and deeds. Well, if you take title to the property, say in a tax deed, and that property has contamination on it, you just bought yourself a cleanup. You don't want to be in that situation. If you're buying tax liens and deeds, you want to be buying them in a limited liability company, so it's isolated and protected from yourself and your other assets. So that's another area. Maybe we create a separate LLC in this Nevada LLC just for our tax liens and deeds. So I'll just put tax inside of there. This screen's getting filled up, but if you have investment assets you want to protect, maybe you keep a limited partnership over here for your investment assets, would go inside of this LP. Again, it's all working towards one goal, to ensure that Clint individually or you yourself are protected from any harm that should occur. So if I can clean this up here, I'm going to erase the screen and redraw everything. You'd have a corporation set up here. We'll make your corporation the manager of your various LLCs, so it manages your property that holds these rentals. Your corporation, when you attend classes, when you go to another educational class, you're going as an officer of your corporation, so it's a deductible expense for you. I just got back from Hawaii. I was there for a week teaching a class with several small business owners. All of them that attended this class came as an employee of their corporation, and they wrote off the cost of the entire trip. This is something that is available to you if you have your business set up. And that's why we want that corporation on top. It's your driving force, your engine, so to speak, for your tax deductions. Now, possibly you have a Nevada LLC set up here to own these LLCs. Then we create a living trust to own all of this. This is your living trust down here, and it holds everything. Inside of your living trust, you will put your personal residence. You will place your vehicles inside of your living trust. Your personal bank account will go inside of your living trust. It's this big box that you've created, again, for the reasons I discussed earlier, so that if something were to happen to you, everything goes to your surviving spouse. Your estate taxes are reduced, and then when your surviving spouse passes away or she's incapacitated, then your children take over. But they take over in the manner in which you've prescribed in your living trust. I mean, I'm not going to give my kids everything. If I were to die, my wife were to die when our kids are 20 years of age, they have to wait until they're 35 years of age before they will take title to all of the assets in our estate. I'm sure many of you think along the same lines, that you want your children to have opportunity to mature before they gain title to these assets. That's what the living trust will do for you. That's why everyone should have this particular document in their overall plan. Now, some other strategies you want to look at. If you're investing, you're going to be making money. So where does that money reside? Do you let it sit with the property? No, you do not allow your cash to sit with your property. Because your tenants start paying you rent, this LLC a year from now may have $15,000 cash in it. We've just mixed a dangerous asset with a safe asset now. What we want to do is pull those safe assets out. At the workshop, we teach you how to do this and where to park it. I'll tell you a little bit right now the way we do it is we create a separate entity out here on the side managed by your corporation. We call it your personal bank. That's where all your cash resides. We want to get that out of these LLCs, out of your corporation, over into your personal bank that is charging order protected entity that is designed to isolate those safe assets from your personal liabilities and those of your business. Now, as your cash starts to increase over here in this special entity that we've created specifically for this type of purpose, when you want to go out and buy something in the future, this is where you go to borrow money. So you actually start loaning money to yourself, and you then secure your own assets. So should something happen on a property, you're the lien holder on it, not the bank. It's your entity that you set up that holds the lien. So if somebody came after that particular property, you get paid back first. That's what we can do with proper entity planning when you put all this stuff together. So these are just some of the strategies that we're going to be teaching you in depth on how to protect your real estate, how to protect your investments. We're going to show you how to take a corporation and how to go out and start rehabbing properties and isolate all of those properties from each other. That is a liability, because you could have this corporation, you could have 2 or 3 rehabs going on, but you don't want to run them through the corporation. If you're building up name recognition for that company, in case you're out there marketing your corporation, if something were to hit it, involved in a lawsuit, you lose all of that marketing that you've been working on. So what you can do is you can create special purpose entities for your rehab work. So if something were to happen with one of those rehabs, it's just this one entity you cast off, and your corporation still remains strong and protected, and your name is not jeopardized in that particular instance. We're going to show you how to subdivide raw land, that if you own raw land, how we can keep it taxed at long-term capital gains rate at 15% by utilizing your corporation. We're going to show you how you can take a corporation. I don't know how many of you are interested in this. I mean, maybe you have IRAs right now. You've been considering investing in real estate with your self-directed IRA, or turning your IRA into a self-directed IRA. Let me tell you something about that. If you haven't done it yet, don't. Okay, stop. Wait, come to our event or contact us. I'm going to give you a different option, and that's called your own private pension plan that we'll set up off your corporation. Self-directed pension plan, that is. What does that mean? You take your IRA money, you roll it into this pension plan, you're in control. You have a checkbook. If you want to invest in real estate, you've got this checkbook. You can go out and buy their property in the name of your pension. You don't have to go to an IRA trustee and ask them to cut the check. You don't have to go to this IRA trustee and tell them they have to sign the paperwork for you. I've run into so many clients that have told me that the worst thing they ever did was set up a self-directed IRA because they have lost more deals and having to deal with their IRA custodian and try to get these deals through them in order so they can close on the property, that if they had the control of the checkbook, which you cannot do with an IRA, if they had that checkbook in their hands, they could have closed on that property immediately and taken title, but they missed out on it because somebody else came and snapped it up before their IRA custodian got the paperwork turned around. Your private pension plan is what you should be focusing on rather than a self-directed IRA, and that comes from having that corporation. Not to mention, we're going to be showing you how you can borrow. You can't borrow out of an IRA, but we can roll those monies from your existing IRA into your pension plan, and you can start borrowing from it. We're going to show you how when you make money in your corporation, you can start funding this pension plan. Yeah, we have some clients that are moving over $45,000 a year on a tax-deferred basis in some plans. I have other clients that put aside $125,000 a year tax deferred, and it all comes from setting up their own self-directed pension plan. That's available to you. You just have to know how to utilize it in your planning, and you open up multiple opportunities for you when it comes to retirement investing. So that would start with the pension plan. We're going to go through situations where you can partner with your plan or partner with your IRA through setting up very specific limited liability companies. Most of the times, if you talk to people about this, they'll tell you it's a prohibited transaction. If you do it right, you can actually partner with your own IRA. That is, you can put in money, your pension or your IRA can put in money, and it's not a prohibited transaction. But it's how you set it up and having the appropriate agreement in place. That's something that we teach you. You can call our firm. We'll go through that with you, but it may be something that you might be interested in. So we're going to cover a lot of different strategies at the 3-day asset protection workshop. If you haven't been to one, you need to get there to understand how all this stuff works together for you. I can tell you that by going to these classes, we're going to show you so many different tax deductions that it more than pays for the cost of the class. You benefit from here on out by setting up these structures in the manner in which we prescribed. So these are just some of the things that, as I stated, we go through joint ventures, how you can take LLCs and you want to joint venture with 2 LLCs down here with other people that you're working with to ensure that if something were to happen to them, you don't lose everything, you maintain control of your investment. Because I know when a lot of people are first getting started in real estate, they want to team up with somebody. I mean, most people that I met with that team up with people, it typically doesn't work out. And that's an inherent problem in any type of partnership arrangement. So you want to plan for this venture failing. I know it's not the way you want to look at it when you're at the outset, but you should plan for your exit. And by creating the LLCs in the appropriate manner, you can do that. So if it doesn't happen, then you can unwind it all. We'll show you with the corporation how you can set that thing up that if you decide you want to unwind it, you can get certain tax deductions that are only available if you set your corporation up the right way. That is, you can get a $50,000 personal income tax deduction upon winding that corporation down through certain stock loss treatments under the IRS code. These are just part of the strategies that we go through for individual real estate investors to show them how to protect their overall assets. So those are some of the strategies. I hope you're looking at that now and you're realizing that you yourself should be putting these things in place for your structure. What I would tell you is that you should be drawn along with me and saying, all right, I have these assets here, here's what I want to cover. So I'm looking like I'm going to need a corporation, I'm going to need an LLC set up here for rental real estate, I'm probably going to need a Nevada limited liability company, a land trust, a living trust, to start fleshing out your plan. And then once you have this in place, you can add in as many LLCs as you want just by drawing the boxes inside of it going forwards. You don't have to dismantle everything. Once this is in place, your foundation is there to allow you to take off and take this career to the next level. All right, now I want to go through what you should be doing right now after watching this DVD to prepare for the upcoming workshop that you'll be attending, or if you want to contact us directly and start up a consultation. Included with these DVDs are several documents that we would like you to complete. Starting off with the Asset Protection Questionnaire. Inside of that Asset Protection Questionnaire, we're going to ask for some basic information about you, about your family, the ages of the individuals involved in your family. I want to know about the types of income sources you presently have, who you work for, if you're a sole proprietor, if you're a W-2 wage earner. On that document, we want to know about your income, retirement income, what type of plans you've already set up. I also want to know about what type of future plans that you're interested in. On that questionnaire, we're going to have a lot of boxes that are going to ask you for your rental real estate. If you own any investment real estate, be it raw land, be it property, be it commercial real estate, we want you to list that out for us as well. Now, in completing that section of the questionnaire, it's going to ask for your basis in the asset, that is what you acquired it for, how much debt is on the property, what is the fair market value of the property, and how is it titled. Now, when you're filling that out, do not concern yourself with exact numbers. We're looking for rounded figures. We want to know where the property is located. So you might put down, I have a property in Tennessee. It's worth about $60,000. I owe $30,000 on it. And then you would put down on that questionnaire that you own it in your own name, personal. If you own it in LLC, let us know that you own it in a limited liability company. We also ask you on that questionnaire to list out any current business entities that you've created. Now, what I'm asking you for here is I want to know any corporations that you've set up that are filed, that are registered with the Internal Revenue Service, any LLCs, limited partnerships, living trusts, or land trusts. If you've not formalize them yet, then do not list them, because that will just throw us off. We only want those entities that are currently active and you're utilizing them. And we want to know what type of income they're producing for you as well. That's important in putting together your plan. There's going to be some questionnaires in there. It's going to ask you where you plan to invest. What we want to know there is where you see yourself investing in the next 5 to 10 years. I want to know which states you plan to invest in. If you think you're going to operate in just one state for the next 10 years and you don't plan to go out of state, like I myself invested in 6 different states. I invest nationwide. I look for the appropriate market, and then I go and I start buying property. You may be doing that yourself. I need to know that. You may not know all the states, but if you think you're going to be investing in a multi-state plan, we need to know that information. Hey, I want to know what type of potential income you're looking for, what you expect to be making, how you expect to earn that. So on that particular section, what you need to list out for us is, Clint, I'm interested in passive income from rental real estate activities. I don't see myself as flipping properties, and I expect, but within 5 years, I'll be generating $15,000 a year, or $15,000 a month, that is, not a year, hopefully, $15,000 a year, or a month in passive income. I'm not a flipper. I'm not a guy that's going to go out there and rehab properties. Okay, that's important information for us in putting together your plan. So the Asset Protection Questionnaire, we're going to ask that you complete that. If you're coming to our workshop, you have that ready to go when you come there, because when you come to the event, we're going to sit down with you. One of the attorneys at the event will sit down with you and go through and design your particular structure for you. That's why it's also important you bring with us a matrix. Fill out the matrix. Let us know where your assets are currently held and how you see them, because I want to understand it through your eyes before I start planning it out for you. So fill out the matrix that is included in this kit as well, or with this DVDs, and then bring that along. Now, if you're contacting us directly and you're not going to the event, you can just call, you get the appointment set up, the consultation time set up, and then we're going to ask that you fax this into our office prior to the initial consultation. So we want a completed Asset Protection Questionnaire. We want a completed matrix. I also want to know about your existing entities. Now, we're going to ask about them on the Asset Protection Questionnaire. However, when you're coming to the event, bring them with you. I don't want to sit down with somebody and then have this discussion. Well, I'm not sure if it's in my documents because I left them at home. No, this is your opportunity to have them reviewed by an attorney who understands asset protection, who knows what to look for. And I'll give you an example of that. An area of limited liability companies that comes up a lot when I'm looking at people's existing documents. There are provisions that they've incorporated in their LLC, and they didn't know this, but there are provisions in there that state that they have to distribute money out of their LLC each and every year. Now, if you have a charging order against you and you don't want to distribute any money, well, guess what? That horse has left the barn. You have to distribute money because your operating agreement tells you have to do it. You don't want that in there. Well, there's a lot of things like that we find in existing operating agreements. That's why we want to see them, to show you where the landmines lie in your own documents and how we can protect you by changing some of that language. So bring any existing documents you have with you so we can review those during our consultation. Now, we also want you to bring along with you or provide to us an expense log. I want to know what you've spent thus far in creating or moving forwards with this business venture. If you've taken a class, an educational class already, I want to know when you took that class, how much you spent on that class. I want to know any expenses associated with traveling there, food, lodging, transportation. We want all of that, because this is all going to work towards figuring out how we can produce for you the greatest tax deductions that are out there. But we can't do that unless we know where the expenses lie. And you're going to want this anyways for the end of the year. I mean, when our CPAs prepare tax returns, they want the information laid out for them so there aren't any hidden expenses that get missed. And in fact, if you end up utilizing some of our tax services that we provide to our clients, you're going to find that we'll perform a 2-year tax review for you, because we found that many times we can save clients money. Deductions that were often missed by their existing CPAs who just don't deal with real estate investors like we do, or deal with investors or small business owners. You want CPAs who know how to put together returns that are designed to produce the greatest tax deductions for you, and do it in such a manner that do not create red flags. And that's something Toby's going to be talking about to you on the tax DVD. So we want you to bring forth all of these documents. Also, with regards to the expenses, I want to know where you see your future expenses line. This all goes towards creating a sound business plan for your business. You should know that when you're going into business, you need to budget things out. And so that's what we're helping you do here. Tell us where the expenses are. Tell us where you see the future expenses coming from. So now we can tell you, all right, so you see these expenses here. We want to run the corporation. Here's how we're going to do it. Or maybe this is going to be personal, but if you need some money for it, I can show you how we can get some money out of your retirement plan tax-free to you to help offset those expenses. So the more information you can provide myself or the attorneys in my firm, the more assistance we can provide you in reducing your taxes and protecting your assets. So these documents are crucial. When you come to the event, the Asset Protection Seminar, it's going to be 3 days. We're going to be going through many different topics. We're going to go through corporations, limited liability companies, limited partnerships, land trusts, living trusts in depth. We're going to be teaching you the strategies of how you can tie these entities together to take what would have been income taxable to you in your personal tax bracket and shift it to an entity that will produce tax deductions for you, and then we can get that income back to you in a manner that possibly may be tax-free. There are lots of different ways to put these things together. You just have to understand what we often refer to as strategic entity planning. Now, I know many of you may have your local attorney or your local CPA you've been working with, but I can tell you, unless they do this on a day in and day out basis like our firm, this is all we do, they're probably not going to be up on the latest strategies. These classes that we teach on asset protection are up to date with the latest strategies, with the latest law changes that are out there. And first and foremost, what you understand is that the people who teach them, the attorneys that come to these classes and teach them, or the CPAs, we're real estate investors. We ourselves are doing what you're doing. So we're applying the same strategies we use with our own planning for our clients to help them protect and keep more of what they earned. My name is Clint Coons. Okay, if you want to get a hold of us, our number is 1-800-706-4741. You can check us out on the web at www.alglaw.com. Sign up for our free tax newsletter. Each month I put together a tax newsletter with a lot of important tax tips for individuals for running their businesses. It's a free tax newsletter. You can also sign up for a free gold membership on our website, where you'll have access to several instructional videos and forms that you can download that'll assist you in your business planning, in your real estate investing. So take a look at our site. We put up weekly blog posts on relevant topics that are important to you as an investor. I want to thank you for taking the time to consider this DVD series. I look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming events. With that, thank you very much. Now let's turn it over to Toby to talk about taxes.